A school is not bricks and mortar. It is humanity in microcosm. It is a dream, a wish, a hope for the future. It is a message from the past to tomorrow. It is founded on knowledge and fueled by idealism. It functions on the efforts and dedication of its staff and is inspired by the example of their predecessors. Some of these have loaned their names to these collections of bricks and people and aspirations. They are the faces behind the schools. We salute those educators for whom schools in our parish are named. By 1908, the Jefferson Parish school system found itself suddenly grown up. A rather substantial cash balance gave the board confidence in the future that it had lacked up to that point. Realizing that progress was possible, the board obtained the services of J.C. Ellis as superintendent for the salary of $1,800 a year. Among the duties imposed on Mr. Ellis for that salary was the superintendency, the secretaryship of the board, and the part-time teaching principalship of McDonough Jefferson High School. He was to be superintendent for 32 years. It may have been the best business deal for a government agency since the Louisiana Purchase. Mr. Ellis was born in Union Parish in the northern part of Louisiana in 1868. He attended the public schools of that parish, and upon graduation from high school, entered Dixon Normal College in Tennessee, where he received his B.A. degree. His work at Dixon was so commendable that he was given a fellowship to Peabody Normal in Nashville for a year of graduate study. The following summer, he pursued a course for teachers at the University of Chicago. Mr. Ellis entered the teaching profession at Tallulah, where he taught for 2 years, then transferred to New Iberia High School. This position he held for 4 years, after which he became superintendent of schools for Iberia Parish. He held this position for 4 years as well. In July 1908, he accepted the superintendency of the Jefferson Parish school system. The problems which presented themselves to Mr. Ellis were numerous. The greatest bugbear of them all was, as usual, finances. In looking back over the financial record of the Jefferson Parish schools, it can readily be seen that the road was a bumpy one. Periods of temporary prosperity were soon offset by periods of depression. This uncertainty necessarily had to be ironed out before a sound and stable foundation could be laid for a truly progressive school system. Mr. Ellis coped with this difficulty by planning new sources of revenue and economizing wherever possible. Housing presented itself as a rather difficult problem. The parish operated 23 schools, but in those 23 schools there were only 34 rooms for an average of 1.5 rooms per building. This meant that there were many small, scattered schools which were hard to reach and to supervise. Mr. Ellis visited the various schools in the parish to ascertain conditions and to suggest methods of improvement. One trip was made on a rattling old train to Wagaman. After reaching his destination and walking through the town, he did not see any building which resembled a school. He asked a resident for directions, but upon following them, he still did not see anything resembling a school. He did hear the prattling of children at their lessons in what looked to be an old store. Upon entering the building, he discovered to his surprise that it was the school, in a dilapidated grocery store that the school board had rented for that purpose. Other schools in the parish, though not quite so bad physically, were poorly equipped, and only 10 of the 23 had any heating system at all. Superintendent Ellis remedied the system by consolidating wherever possible. The larger, better-equipped schools which were built looked like schools rather than abandoned houses or sheds. To finance this, one of the first acts of the Jefferson Parish Board of School Directors, ancestor of our school board, was to ask the voters for a 2 mill tax for a period of 5 years for school repair and construction. Other improvements were to follow. In 1918, Mr. Ellis told the board, I believe Jefferson Parish should pay its teachers as much as any other parish is paying for the same service. We cannot hold our best teachers unless we pay a wage that is comparable to those paid by other boards." 2 years later, he had another communication. "I want to bring to your attention a plan which I think will place within reach of every boy and girl in the parish a high school education." The accomplishments of J.C. Ellis were numerous. Financial aid to the schools was increased. Centralized control of the school system by board and superintendent was established. Carefully planned consolidation allowed the board to operate fewer, better located schools. A transfer service to convey rural students to the well-located schools was established, and school buildings and equipment were improved. Further, supervisors were appointed to visit the schools to oversee and suggest new methods of instruction. Health supervisors were established to examine and vaccinate students, and dentists to examine teeth. Physical education teachers were used to care for the physical well-being of the students, and art and music teachers for their cultural growth. J.C. Ellis of Union Parish brought the public schools of Jefferson Parish into the 20th century. He retired in 1940. Ella Cutler Pittman was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, September 3, 1878. We know little of her early life, only what she told to her loyal friends. She was a classmate at teacher training school of Stella Worley. Ella Cutler was married to John E. Pittman, a merchant from Larose, Louisiana. She had an only child, a son, John Jr., who died a tragic death at an early age. Ella C. Pittman performed her duties well. She not only managed school business, but also taught the 7th grade. She attended her home, community life, religious and civic duties. She did all of this work with a love and devotion that seemed to radiate to all who came in contact with her. She loved people, plants, and animals. They were her life. Our interest is the part of her life spent working in Marrero. Under the supervision of the late Superintendent J.C. Ellis, Ella C. Pittman was promoted to the position of principal of Ames Elementary School in Marrero in 1932. The school and the village were young. The new red brick schoolhouse had been dedicated 5 years previously. When she retired at the age of 72, her school had grown to a faculty of 7, 1 teacher per grade, and had seen the addition of classrooms, auditorium, yard space, and a small tin cafeteria, the start of the lunchroom program of today. It was a sad time. The community, faculty, and students did not want to relieve her of her school duties. She was saddened. She loved her work. But the new Louisiana teachers' retirement law had been put into effect. The retirement system was young, and it could not provide much financial support. Ella Pittman's retirement income would be small. She had no living family. She was alone. She lived alone in her home on Myers Boulevard. The new principal, teachers, and children gave a farewell party, and the parents contributed a farewell gift of money to aid in her retirement. Her home on Myers Boulevard became a welcoming place for her friends, neighbors, and children. Her last years of life were enjoyed sitting and talking on her flower-surrounded porch and yard with her neighbors, who often gave a needed hand in the way of household tasks, yard work, health care, and meals. The children often stopped by on their way home from school. Her home was just a few blocks behind the Ames Elementary School, to ask help with their lessons and talk of their day spent at school. She never refused to give them advice and assistance. Ella Pittman was a splendid elementary teacher. She knew and understood little children and taught them to stand tall, to be honorable citizens, and to pass these lessons on to their children. Vernon Haynes was born December 17, 1910 in Arkansas City, Arkansas, and was educated in the public school system of Lake Village, Arkansas, where his family had moved. In 1928, he arrived in New Orleans, Louisiana, after receiving an academic scholarship to Tulane University. He participated in the sports of track, football, and basketball, lettering in all three in 1930-31. His ability as an athlete and a scholar was rewarded by his being selected as captain of the basketball team. His skills as an athlete were officially noticed by the All-American Selection Committee when he was recognized by that organization as having All-American status. His ability drew wide recognition from the local and national press. In 1935, he married the former Gilda Polig and was the father of one son. His contribution to our area not only is exemplified by outstanding example, but by deeds in his service to all facets of public education and in his workings with the youth of our parish. Following a career as a coach and teacher in Orleans and Ouachita parishes and an 8-year stint at Tulane, Mr. Haynes joined the Jefferson Parish Public Schools system as a math and civics teacher in 1951, becoming principal at Metairie Junior High, which now bears his name, from 1955 to 1964. When he became director of personnel for our school system in 1964, there was no such department. He organized it into a unit that became a model for other school systems. He is remembered by all who knew him as not only an All-American athlete, but an All-American husband, father, educator, counselor, and friend. On May 29, 1973, while still serving the public school system and the youth of our parish, he passed away, leaving a legacy of educational accomplishments as an inspiration to all who teach. Anastasia Alexander, one of 7 children, was born August 26, 1894 in Kenner, Louisiana. She was the daughter of the late Margaret Long and John Clancy. John Clancy, her father, was the first president of the Jefferson Parish School Board. Mrs. Alexander attended the Sophie B. Wright High School in New Orleans and later received a normal certificate to teach. Miss Stacia, as she was so affectionately known by all, was a very dedicated teacher. Her first years of teaching began at the Destrehan Refinery School, known at that time as the Mexican Petroleum and later as the Pan American Refinery. Mrs. Alexander later taught in a 3-room schoolhouse in Hanson City, now a part of Kenner. Mrs. Alexander served 29 years on the Jefferson Parish School Board. For 20 of those years, she was president of the board. Prior to that, she served as vice president. Mrs. Alexander was well known throughout the parish schools. During her years with the Jefferson school system, there were many accomplishments. Music instruction was offered. Used instruments were purchased from LSU and loaned to those who could not afford to buy a musical instrument, thus making sure that everyone could take advantage of the program. During her administration, she started the school bus system for school children, who before had to use public transportation to go to and from school. Always striving to improve the schools of Jefferson, Miss Stacia saw to it that athletics became a vital part of the school curriculum. After retirement from the school board, and because of her interest in and dedication to the children of the parish, she continued to do substitute teaching in Kenner High School, East Jefferson High, and John Clancy School. She taught first grade and kindergarten at Our Lady of Perpetual Help School and served as librarian for 2 years. Mrs. Alexander passed away at her home on the morning of April 27, 1980. And in her passing, Jefferson Parish lost a great lady and a truly dedicated educator who befriended many and whose memory will always live in the hearts of those who were fortunate enough to have known Miss Stacia. Lily White Ruppel, daughter of William D. White and Margaret Zuffel, was born in Gretna on November 6, 1877, the 7th of 9 children. Subsequent to her early education in Gretna and graduation from high school, she enrolled in the New Orleans Normal School for Teachers, from which she graduated in 1895. About 6 years after her marriage, she moved back to Gretna and accepted a teaching assignment in the Gretna Primary School No. 1, where she taught until 1943, becoming principal of that school. She never ceased studying, attending Newcomb in Tulane after her school day was over and in the summertime. She also took piano and violin lessons, studied art and public speaking. She painted china, oils, and watercolor. She was an avid reader, but most of all, she was a dedicated teacher, and her incessant drive for knowledge was born of a desire to pass it on to others and to inspire them with the same insatiable thirst for learning she had. She was the originator of carnival parades in Gretna. The first parade of floats on the streets of Gretna was composed of floats made by the children in her school. She was a person who loved life and was generous to a fault. She had many interests and hobbies: gardening, reading, and collecting just about everything. She bought and collected so many books, she had to build a library to house them. She accumulated antiques of all kinds: furniture, china, bric-a-brac, and pictures, to name a few. She loved auctions and required practically a shop full of books and stacks of sheet music at one single auction. She delighted in outbidding her competitors, especially when some prize first edition went on the block, and usually came away the victor. Not only did she buy books, she read them. And many mornings when called to get ready for school, she was found with her light still burning and a book in her hands. She continued teaching until she became ill and was forced to retire. After 2 eye operations, she lost her sight, but her spirit was indomitable. In the hospital, she was trying to arrange for someone to teach her Braille, as she was lost without her books. She had suffered with diabetes for several years and finally lost this battle. She died on April 14th, 1944, but her memory lives on. Walter George Schneckenburger was born in the city of Kenner on November 24, 1899, one of 10 children. Cotton, as he was affectionately known, received his elementary education in Kenner and graduated from Jesuit High School in 1916. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts degree from Loyola in 1920 and his law degree on June 6, 1923. Although a successful attorney, it soon became apparent to him that he wanted to devote his life to the development of the youth of the area. To this end, he abandoned law and, in 1929, accepted a position as teacher and the first coach at Kenner High School, where his teams were accorded statewide recognition. It was common knowledge during this period that he spent more of his own money for the team than he was paid to coach it. In recognition of his ability and his dedicated interest in the youth of our parish, in 1937, Cotton was named athletic supervisor for the Jefferson Parish school system. Under his guidance, the athletic programs in our public schools were expanded and developed to become one of the foremost in the state. He gave freely of his time, effort, and organizational ability in helping to make available to every child in the area the opportunity to participate in some form of athletic activity. To him, physical development was an essential adjunct in the total education of our youth. Athletics were not only physically beneficial, but created within the individual a competitive spirit and the willingness to work with others, which would be invaluable in the world after the conclusion of one's schooling. After his comprehensive athletic program was implemented, Cotton was named Assistant Superintendent in charge of transportation, health, athletics, and physical education, a position he held from 1940 until his retirement in 1963. He died on March 16, 1968. Of Walter George Schneckenburger, it may truly be said that he fully expended all his energies in the service of his fellow man and his community. His life was one of action on behalf of others. The value of such activity exceeds the lifespan of any man. Its continuing effects constitutes his personal bequest to the future. Joshua L. Butler Sr. was the 11th of 17 children. Born in poverty, Mr. Butler's father and older brothers labored in the sugarcane fields of his little farm, cutting cane and doing menial labor that the younger Butlers might be educated. Mr. Butler began his education in a one-room schoolhouse, completing his elementary education at the academy in his native Houma. For his high schooling, he worked as a handyman and lived on the premises of Peck's Memorial Home in New Orleans. Graduation found him entering New Orleans University, later to become Dillard, as a pre-medical student. Though quite successful academically, economics would not permit of such an arduous course of study, so he entered education. Prior to his graduation, he taught for several years at Godey School, but a change of administration forced him to look elsewhere to support his growing family. Through his brother, he learned of an opening in Jefferson Parish. For the princely salary of $320 a year, he started teaching at Rosenwald Elementary in 1930. Though Rosenwald was an accredited school, an accredited high school for black students did not exist at that time in Jefferson Parish. Students who completed the 7th grade either got married or dropped out of school. This greatly disturbed Mr. Butler, who was now principal. He endeavored to change the situation by negotiation with the seemingly less than amenable school board. Diplomacy was also required with members of his own community who were similarly resistant to change. During these times of frustration, Mr. Butler was encouraged by Superintendent Higgins and others to continue. At last, Mr. Butler acquired a high school for Rosenwald, but not an accredited one. Students completing the 11th grade were forced to go elsewhere to be accepted into colleges. This was not Mr. Butler's dream. His dream was to have a fully equipped plant to meet the needs of all West Bank students, a plant that would compete favorably with any other high school. Finally, both elementary and high school at Rosenwald were accredited. Colleges began to unquestioningly accept graduates of Rosenwald, whose name was later changed to Marrero Oswego until Lincoln High School came into existence. Before the state or parish established a lunch program, Joshua Butler had one at his school. Maintenance was a problem. Mr. Butler and the larger boys made the repairs. The stoves needed wood. Mr. Butler provided it. In 1952, the pressures of post-war population growth created Lincoln High and Elementary in Marrero. Because of Mr. Butler's vision, many cultural activities were organized to improve school-community relations. Operettas, dances, PTAs, booster clubs, music concerts, proms, rallies, art displays. Since many students could not succeed academically, Mr. Butler promoted athletic achievement. Without a qualified coach or equipment, Mr. Butler implemented plans for an athletic program which resulted in the eventual hiring of a qualified teacher coach. Above all, it was Mr. Butler's goal to improve instruction and curriculum so that his graduates could face society with enthusiasm, health, and the skills for success. During the years of his separation from Lincoln and his retirement, Mr. Butler suffered from the pain of separation as well as physical ills. He died on June 25, 1965. He had nurtured what was to become a major high school in its intellectual and physical development through the embryonic, infant, adolescent, and adult stages. He suffered as it grew. He rejoiced as its graduates succeeded. This was his dream, to take potential talent from the community, to nurture and mature it in its development, and above all, to return it to the community to serve others. This he did. They are his true monument. We salute those educators for whom schools in our parish are named. In his early youth, Alfred Bonnabel settled in the Metairie section of Jefferson Parish, where his father had extensive land holdings. He engaged in planting, stock raising, and real estate development. A man of considerable wealth, he devoted much of his time to community enterprises and works of charity. Immediately following the war between the states, he appreciated the importance and the necessity of formally educating the youth of the South so that his beloved section of the country could throw off the shackles of carpetbag rule and regain its rightful place in the nation's development of its commerce and industry. With this in mind, he directed his attention to the political affairs of Jefferson Parish. He served 27 years as a member of the police jury and 46 years as a member of the Board of School Directors of Jefferson Parish, the predecessor of our present Jefferson Parish School Board. He was responsible for the construction of the first public school in Jefferson to be placed on the east bank of the Mississippi. His later daughter-in-law, Luella Van Rankin Bonnabel, was the first principal of the school, which was located on the present site of Haynes Middle School on Metairie Road between Magnolia and Hollywood Drives. He was a man with a keen sense of business acumen and fully appreciated the great economic potential of his parish, which would surely grow and bear fruit for the benefit of all its residents if they would but invest in a strong school system where both the advantaged and the disadvantaged children could acquire a well-rounded education. He had seen ignorance exploited by unconscionable men after the war and vowed it should never happen again. It was well he knew that the educated child had a better than even chance of living a life of fulfillment. Upon his death in 1918, the local press referred to Alfred Bonnabel as the father of public education in Jefferson Parish. I'm George Sanchez. We have just met another of the people for whom a Jefferson Parish school was named. Another person who has contributed to our past, shaped our present, pointed the way to our future. Another face behind the school. This has been another salute to an educator for whom a Jefferson Parish school is named.